I'm Janice Edwards. Coming up on Signature Silicon Valley, award-winning journalist Gary Singh from the Metro joins us to talk about his book, The San Jose Earthquakes. Then we have the membership economy with Robbie Kelvin-Baxter, and from Silicon Valley to Swaziland with Rick and Wendy Wally. Lots of great topics. Join us. I'm Janice Edwards, and welcome to Signature Silicon Valley. We begin our show today with award-winning journalist, the author of the columnist for Silicon Alleys at the Metro, Gary Singh. His book is The San Jose Earthquakes, A Seismic Soccer Legacy. And if you're a soccer fan, you will love this. Gary, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, your love of soccer began at an early age. You played soccer when you were young. What inspired you to write this book?
Several things. The Earthquakes were opening up a brand new stadium, Avaya Stadium, which is now open, not too far up the street from where we're sitting. And it's a fabulous new facility, and I thought that the time was right to finally tell the entire 40-year history of this club, this sport in this city. And I've lived almost the entire 40 years, not all of it, or I've lived almost the whole history. And I've started out going to games when I was a kid. I was a teenager working in the concession stands at Spartan Stadium. Then I was in college at San Jose State going to the games. And then I became a journalist for the last 14 years. And so all of that is in the backstory, and it just wound up being a perfect sequence of events, the stadium opening, and the timing was right, and everything just fell into place last year, and that enabled the book to essentially write itself.
Wow, that's great, because the book is fascinating. I love the pictures, and George Best, Crazy George. For people who aren't familiar with some of the history, tell us a little bit about Crazy George.
Well, Crazy George single-handedly transformed the entire professional sports landscape in the United States, if not the world. He started out at San Jose State in the late 60s. He was the guy that jumped into the audience and bashed on his snare drum to rouse the fans and get them all joining into the same cheers and insulting the opposing players. And then when the San Jose Earthquakes began in 1974, he was hired and paid about $30 a game or something like that to do the same thing. And he subsequently went on to lead cheers and instigate crowds at football games, hockey games, baseball, the World Cup, and the Olympics all over the world. And he essentially redefined the entire participatory fan experience.
Yes.
And he began, professionally speaking, at San Jose Earthquakes games.
The fanatic and fan was definitely Crazy George.
Right.
And you have great stories in here about Pele and George Best. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Pele, both of those guys, it's still argued as who was actually the greatest player of all time. Pele is generally referred to as the greatest player of all time. George Best never got to play in a World Cup, so that's part of the reason why he's, and plus he kind of exited the scene from European play rather early in his life. But as far as San Jose goes, in the 70s, we had never had a professional sport before. There had never been any professional team sport. There was college football, there was very minor league baseball, but other than that, there had never been any pro sport. And then all of a sudden, here we were playing against all the bigger cities in the country, like Chicago, New York, and Dallas, and Los Angeles. And when Pele, who at that time you could safely say was the hugest sports figure in the world, and he came to Spartan Stadium twice in 1975 and 1976. I was not at those games. We did not start going to the games until the year later, but at the time, those were the biggest sporting events in San Jose's history at that time.
Right. Yes, fascinating. Troy Dayak is another one. Dayak from the San Jose class. You have a picture here that's great too. Yes.
Yeah, Troy Dayak played for let's see, when he was a teenager, he got signed to the San Francisco Bay Blackhawks, which was a team in between the two different San Jose Earthquakes eras. And then that team essentially is what merged with the still percolating Earthquakes history to form the first MLS team, the San Jose Clash. And it was basically the whole bloodline of everything coming together when MLS started. And then that team subsequently renamed itself back to the San Jose Earthquakes. And then Troy went on to, he left, he got injured, then retired, and then came back and then won 2 championships with the Earthquakes. And then he now coaches up in Tracy. And he was just at the game last weekend. But he's one of the figures who is part of multiple eras in the history and still is a diehard Bay Area dude. He could have played in New York, but he gave that up and decided he wanted to play here when San Jose started.
I know, the Bay Area is so amazing. And like I said, and you also have photos of Landon Donovan, too, from 2001. Too. So as you meet the people and you've been researching all this, what's been the most rewarding part of it for you?
I think the entire process has been rewarding. I am a very, very fortunate person. There are plenty of times in my life when I could have left San Jose and maybe should have left San Jose, but I've lived almost the entire story, and it was not even. This was the funnest thing I ever did. I mean, it was not even work for a second. I got to be a kid going to see the games. I got to see George Best, who was one of the most famous players of all time. I got to see him essentially at the end of his career at Spartan Stadium, and that was a year before Landon Donovan was born. And then 20 years later, I get to see, from the press box, I get to see Landon Donovan start his career on the same field. And here I am now still alive, and I live to tell the whole story and write the whole book about it. So the whole thing is just, I'm a very, very fortunate person.
Yeah, and the celebration of the 40th anniversary was incredible too,
right.
The photos that you have in there as well. Well, speaking of fortunate and your writing career, what do you find most rewarding about Silicon Alleys?
The column I write for the newspaper is it's generally the same voice as the book. So if anybody knows the work I do for the newspaper, this is just like reading one of my columns. Exactly. It's just 100 pages instead. And what's been rewarding about that is that a lot of times sometimes it's a lot of work, other times it's not any work. But the most rewarding thing is that I get to basically meet a lot of weird and interesting people around this city. And I get to go and talk to all the people that I would normally be talking to anyway, and then I can always come up with some kind of perspective, and maybe even once in a while write something that affects public policy. Not every time, but once in a while. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you've done a lot. I love your writing, and this is a fascinating read, and it's interesting as you deflect about, well, it just kind of wrote itself. I think as many stories as you tell, I think the backstories of what we haven't, what we don't know about you are probably even more fascinating. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a great book, The San Jose Earthquakes, A Seismic Soccer Legacy is the book. And of course, if you want to reach Gary at the Metro, we have those details on our screen as well.
Thanks.
The membership economy. Find your super users, master the forever transaction, and build recurring revenue. By Robbie Kelman Baxter, originally a Silicon Valley product marketer, and later a consultant to companies ranging from venture-backed startups to SurveyMonkey, Netflix, and Yahoo. About 10 years ago, the author started working with Netflix and fell in love with its subscription model, which was disruptive at the time and led to the bankruptcy of movie rental store chains. Since then, she has gone on to advise dozens of companies on their subscription and community businesses, and believes that the membership economy is the equivalent of the modern age industrial revolution. First, we need to define the term membership economy and why we should care. Then, we can clarify what the impending transition from ownership to membership entails. And finally, we can examine how this transition could work. The membership economy is all about subscriptions, offering a ton of value on a regular basis to justify recurring value, community, developing network effects to enhance the value of membership, and increase loyalty, building a long-lasting connection to your brand. But why should companies care about membership? The 3 main benefits are: it creates recurring value and thus more predictable cash flows. It has a self-feeding customer conversion funnel, which means that future growth has lower incremental cost through customer referrals. And it generates ongoing data that help a company refine its tactics and constantly learn about its customers. It's happening right now. Our economy is going through a transition from ownership to membership. The key metrics in the ownership economy are transaction value, cross-selling, and economies of scale. The relationship with a customer ends when a transaction is complete. In contrast, that's when the real work starts for membership economy. Paradoxically, one problem with the ownership model is rooted in the declining costs of starting a business. The result is that everyone can set up a website.
Robbie Baxter is the CEO and founder of Peninsula Strategies and the author of The Membership Economy. Find your super users, master the forever transaction, and build recurring revenue. A lot to do and great information. Robbie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure.
Oh, I'm glad to have you here. This is so interesting, and I love the way that you set out the book because you tell people you can read these chapters for this, and you don't mind if people go to the back of the book first if it works for them, because you've really laid out strategies, what you need to know about the membership economy, strategies and tactics, and then at the end, membership economy and transformation. So before we talk about the different pockets that you have here, what is the membership economy?
The membership economy is a term that I coined based on what I was seeing happening with companies that I worked with, starting with Netflix about 12 years ago and proceeding across organizations that wanted to be the Netflix of software, the Netflix of news, the Netflix of music, that wanted to put subscription and membership into their business models. And it really has a couple of key attributes. It's about a move from ownership to access. It's about moving from focusing on the transaction to focusing on the relationship. And it's about a move from organizations that push communications out and the audience has to listen to a model where the audience actually gets to respond and the audience actually gets to talk to one another under the umbrella of the organization in a true multi-directional way.
Yes, and it's so interesting because I remember when we in television started to see this change, and advertising was the first, because like you said, instead of having people just buy something and have it pushed out, it was no, we choose you and you don't tell us what to buy. Social media really transformed the whole transactional business model. It must have been exciting to be at Netflix seeing this coming, because you say in the book that it was disruptive. So did you comprehend then what we now see, that this would be the future?
I wish I could say I was that smart.
You can say it here, no.
But I fell in love with their model.
Okay.
With the Netflix model. I loved that, as a consumer, I loved getting 3 out at a time. I loved always having a movie. They really solved the problem for me of getting great content. And as a business person, I loved the recurring revenue model and the data they were collecting about their customers, which allowed them to provide better services and also to manage cash flow.
So how would you advise someone who has a small business now to incorporate the membership economy in their business?
So the membership economy works great for small business owners and for solopreneurs and independent professionals.
I like that term, solopreneurs, right?
You're an entrepreneur, but you're doing it on
your own. Right.
Yeah, and what I would tell them is to focus not on the products you sell, but on the value you provide, and think about what would it look like if you solved the problem for your customers forever, forever transaction. So for example, if I notice you have beautiful nails.
Oh, thank you.
And the goal of your nails, I would imagine, is not to get a manicure, it's to look polished and have your nails look good all the time.
Right.
So if a manicure salon moved from a model of you pay by the manicure to we're going to solve the problem of having your hands look nice, and you could pay a monthly fee, stop by for a touch-up anytime, and have, let's say, a regular appointment where not only would you have it in your calendar every week or every month, but you'd also be able to build a relationship with the other people that came in your same time slot and the person who took care of you. And so it creates a lot more value for you, and it really solves the problem.
And if I find a place like that, I can stop doing them myself. So I like that. I like that very much. So it's really about community in a huge sense in that way. And when people are, it's really interesting on the one hand because of the digital age and social media, we're more connected in certain ways, but at the same time we're less connected. People are not engaging. So this really offers an opportunity to engage with people where you share interests and concerns and to build in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a way of finding connection with people who have the same problem or the same goal.
Yes.
Because if you just go with people that you meet in your physical world, you may not find those people that are thinking the same way as you or that are trying to accomplish the same things as you.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about Peninsula Strategies. How did you create that, and what do you do specifically to help solve people's problems?
Yeah, great. Well, Peninsula Strategies is a firm that I founded about 15 years ago. And it's a consulting firm that focuses on helping companies to grow profitably, and especially focusing on organizations in the membership economy. So companies that want to use subscriptions and membership and community as part of their business model, which frankly is any forward-thinking organization.
Right. Who do you see now? Which companies do you see doing this well? You talk about some of those.
There's so many. So my favorite company probably is LinkedIn.
Okay.
And Alan Blue, who's one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, wrote the foreword for the book.
Yes, very impressive. You have you have lots of great endorsements here.
You know, I called him like a fan, and I said, you know, I think you're a true pioneer in the membership economy, and what you've done at LinkedIn is so impressive. Because they really have focused on a forever transaction. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the people who started LinkedIn also started a dating site before they started LinkedIn.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah.
And what's interesting is that when you solve the problem on a dating site, you lose the customer.
That's right.
Right? The
Right.
better job you do, the less business you have.
Exactly.
And
because happily married people can say thank you very much and keep going. Right?
Exactly. I found my soulmate, and I
Yes.
no longer need your service.
Right.
But so they focused on careers because they said that has a really long life. And if we're doing something, we know we're going to do a good job of taking care of them.
Yes.
We want to have a long runway with them. So, you know, LinkedIn has been very thoughtful about how they've built community and about their membership model.
Yes.
And about focusing on the long-term relationship and the value they're providing, as opposed to becoming too focused on any one product or feature.
Yes, and they've really evolved with the endorsements and different things in that way. But speaking of soulmates, you have a really wonderful dedication to your husband here, and you thank a lot of people who helped you along the way in doing the book. A lot of people dream about doing a book, and we met at Invent Future. Denise Brousseau is one of the people you thank as well. So tell me, how was your husband supportive? You said he reread.
Yeah, so I'll confess, I met my husband on the first day of college.
Oh,
and
really?
we were both English majors.
Oh, wow.
So we've been reading each other's papers for half a lifetime.
Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And you know, he always supported me. He read every word dozens of times, and then when it came close to the end, he was proofreading and proofreading and proofreading to make sure that, you know, the book was exactly the way it was supposed to be.
Yes, well, he certainly deserves our thank you for that, because the book is incredible, and it really does help just really break down some of the mysteries for someone who might be starting a business, and also to think about how we continue to engage and connect, which is so important.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Again, the book is The Membership Economy: Find Your Super Users, Master the Forever Transaction, and Build Recurring Revenue. And then also, if you'd like to contact Robbie at Peninsula Strategies, those details are on our screen. Rick and Wendy Wally were executives who'd already put their signature on Silicon Valley in a major way and were well known, but they were looking for something more meaningful to devote their lives to. Their book, From Silicon Valley to Swaziland: How One Couple Found Purpose and Adventure in an Encore Career, details a fascinating journey. Nice to have Wendy and Rick with me here, and I should say that we have worked together in another capacity in the interest of full disclosure, but it's wonderful to see you.
Great to see you.
Great to see you
Thank you,
too.
Janice.
And Wendy, you and I first met when you were out at Junior Achievement, and I was on the board there.
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
And so let's talk about what both of you were doing before you wound up going to Swaziland.
Certainly. I had worked for many years at 3Com and then at a couple of startups in Silicon Valley, in marketing and sales and in various capacities. And then I decided that I was tired of selling software and hardware, so I was looking for a different take. I went to a career coach, and with that I learned what my passions were, which are women, education, entrepreneurship, and youth. And through networking and networking and networking, I came up with Junior Achievement as a possibility. And I ended up going onto the board, and then they hired me. So I worked for Junior Achievement in Silicon Valley for about 4 years, from 2002 to 2006.
Yes.
And then
Rick picks up the story.
Exactly. My transition was a little bit later than hers, but I had spent my whole career here in Silicon Valley, the biggest part of it as a partner in management consulting with Ernst & Young. And then after a few years after she had moved on to more socially beneficial endeavors, I said, it's my turn. And so I started exploring as well and decided that I was interested in international development, international economic development. And I did a lot of research and found TechnoServe, whose tagline is Business Solutions to Poverty. So I had, with my business background, something to offer them.
Wow. And we should mention that all royalties from the book are going to TechnoServe,
That's
so
right.
you're really continuing to pay it forward in that way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you did some exploring, you had some soul searching, some conversations, and how did you decide on Swaziland?
Well, we really didn't decide on Swaziland. Swaziland called
Chose us.
us.
Right.
Yes. When we were ready to volunteer with TechnoServe's volunteer consulting program, we sent our resumes to TechnoServe, and their country director for Swaziland got back to us and said, can you move here later this week?
Oh my gosh.
And we said, well, not later this
Quite.
week, but in a few weeks we can.
Right.
And they were attracted to our backgrounds in business, plus particularly Wendy's background in junior achievement, because they were going to start up a youth program as well as consult to small businesses.
Wow. And Wendy, you had 4 criteria for anywhere that you were going to
Yes,
go. What were those?
so I can tell you, I would never have imagined moving to Swaziland. I had always imagined living abroad, but Paris or London or Hong Kong, one of those places. And when Rick said, well, we're going to move to Africa, I said, okay, here are the 4 things that we need to make sure happen. There are no flying bullets. I don't want to go to a country with Stan in the name. Must have flush toilets and must have hot showers. And so Swaziland's situation met all of our criteria, both where we lived and at the office. So it worked out.
What was it like when you arrived there? What do you remember being the biggest adjustments?
It was surprisingly not a large adjustment. I mean, it was a cute little country. I mean, it's a country of less than 1 million people. Some people say a little more, some people say less. The 2 largest cities are about 100,000 people. So it was surprisingly like a small city in the US. And we weren't out in rural areas most of the time. We were in the city. So we lived in a nice cottage, a little bit rustic, but it was a nice cottage, what you might see in the foothills of the Sierras, like a vacation cottage. And it was surprisingly not dramatically different. We went to the office most days, or similar to what I did in Silicon Valley, I'd go out to my clients. And they were a little bit different businesses. I mean, here it was semiconductors, computers, software. There it was pigs or bakery products or bottled water, or, very different businesses.
Yes, the pigs, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But you were helping people really grow their businesses.
Exactly,
Yes.
yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and my focus when we were both in the office was working with a couple of colleagues, but one in particular, who was tasked with starting a youth entrepreneurship program. So the 2 of us did a little bit of traveling, went to South Africa, but we ended up, after serious assessment, coming up with the fact that junior achievement would best meet the program needs. So he and I helped to start Junior Achievement of Swaziland, and I'm proud to say
rewarding.
it is still going.
Yes.
And it is being led independently now for several years after we left. It was mostly run by sort of a TechnoServe affiliation, but now it is totally independent, which is very exciting.
Wow, congratulations. This is so rewarding and inspiring. It's like we could take a whole show to talk about it. We're almost out of time, but I want to talk about what you both learned about yourselves and each other after how many years of marriage has it been?
44.
Wow, congratulations. So this journey, when you, as you're back now in Silicon Valley, what do you reflect on being the big lessons?
I would say for me that people are people everywhere, that they're warm and wonderful and accepting, and they are friendly and want to be friends with you. The other thing that I think we took away is that you don't need the latest app. You don't need the latest piece of hardware. You are probably living in a bubble, which we are in here in Silicon Valley, but the rest of the world doesn't really care about the latest app. What they care about is surviving and hopefully thriving and making sure that their families are fed and educated and healthy, and that's the most important stuff, and truly that is.
That's a broad perspective, yes.
And just to build on that, we saw entrepreneurs in every place we were, just like entrepreneurs here, except they're doing different things and working mostly with agricultural products, but really had the spirit of trying something, trying to better their family's income, and people have that resilience and that entrepreneurial spirit everywhere.
Right.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you for sharing this, and you have a call to action for everyone to consider what you can do with an Encore career and really make a difference. So again, it's From Silicon Valley to Swaziland, how one couple found purpose and adventure in an Encore career. If you'd like to know more about TechnoServe or Encore fellowships, those details are on our screen. And again, the book From Silicon Valley to Swaziland. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Janice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we talked about Wendy and Rick putting their signature on our valley, and we thank you for putting yours on ours, and we thank you for joining us today. I'm Janice Edwards. Thanks for joining us here at Signature Silicon Valley, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Please join us then.